The stark white envelope felt heavy in my hands, a physical weight that seemed far greater than the single sheet of paper folded inside. I sat at my mahogany desk in the back office of the Zanarello Gallery, the only sound in the room being the low hum of the climate control system designed to protect the millions of dollars worth of canvas and oil paint waiting in the showroom. My thumb traced the embossed logo of the medical center on the corner of the envelope. I didn't need to open it again. I had memorized the words, the numbers, the definitive medical confirmation that had shifted the axis of my entire world just 20 minutes ago. 6 weeks. I pressed a hand to my abdomen, expecting to feel something different, a spark, a change in temperature. But there was only the familiar fabric of my wine-colored silk dress and the rapid, terrified thumping of my own heart. I was pregnant. Me, Chloe Zanarello. Though to the world, and to the man I was about to encounter outside, I was still Chloe Foster. The duality of my life had never felt more fracturing than it did in this moment. Here, inside these walls, I was the capable manager of an elite art gallery, a woman who curated exhibitions for the city's wealthiest patrons. To the public, I was a hard-working single woman climbing the ladder, but in the shadows, in the spaces between heartbeats and whispered phone calls, I was the wife of Silvio Zanarello, the capo of the most powerful crime syndicate on the East Coast. A baby. I closed my eyes, tilting my head back against the leather chair. A child meant vulnerability. In Silvio's world, a child was a target. We were currently in a cold war with the DeLuca family, a tension that snapped like high-voltage wires across the city. Silvio had kept our marriage a secret for this very reason, to keep me out of the crosshairs. If they knew I carried his heir. My phone buzzed violently against the polished wood of the desk, shattering the silence. I jumped, my nerves already frayed. I glanced at the screen, and the small spark of hope that it might be Silvio died instantly, replaced by a heavy, familiar exhaustion. Dad. I hesitated before unlocking the screen. My relationship with Arthur Foster was a series of transactions masked as family obligations. I opened the message. They're going to break my legs, Chloe. I swear. I need $10K by Friday. Please. Just this last time. I have a winning system. I just need a bridge loan. Help your old man. I stared at the text, the desperation bleeding through the pixels. It was never the last time. It was always a bridge loan, a sure thing, a misunderstanding with a bookie. My father wasn't a bad man in his heart, perhaps, but he was a weak one. His addiction to gambling was a black hole that had swallowed my childhood and was now attempting to consume my adulthood. I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. Dad, I paid the rent last month. I don't have $10,000 lying around. The response was immediate, aggressive in its panic. You run that fancy gallery. You deal with rich people all day. Ask for an advance. Chloe, please. These aren't nice guys. They're serious. I let out a breath that was half sigh, half sob. He had no idea. He talked about not nice guys, as if he knew what danger really looked like. He didn't know that his son-in-law was the man who made the not nice guys check under their beds at night. But I couldn't tell him. Dad had a loose tongue when he drank, and a loose tongue was a death sentence in my circle. If I didn't pay, he would get hurt. Or worse, he would get desperate enough to borrow from someone else. Someone who might be connected to the DeLucas. That was a risk I couldn't take. Not now. Not with the secret I was carrying. I logged into my personal banking app. The balance was high, entirely thanks to the salary Silvio insisted on paying me through the gallery's payroll, an amount far exceeding market rate. I felt a pang of guilt using Silvio's money to clean up my father's messes. But what choice did I have? I initiated the transfer. Sent. This is it, Dad. I mean it. If you gamble this away, you're on your own. I placed the phone face down, feeling dirty. The envelope with the pregnancy results still sat there, accusing me. I picked it up, folded it carefully, and tucked it into the inner pocket of my purse, right next to the small silver canister of pepper spray Silvio made me carry. I stood up, smoothing down the wine-colored silk of my dress. It was a new piece, elegant and fluid, moving like liquid ruby around my frame. I caught my reflection in the darkened window of the office. My hazel eyes looked wide, darker than usual, framed by the copper-red waves of my hair that cascaded over my shoulders. I looked composed. I looked like a woman who had it all together. It was the best lie I had ever told. I grabbed my beige trench coat, buttoning it up to my chin. It was late, past closing time, and the forecast had promised a storm. I needed to get to the pickup point. Silvio was coming for me himself tonight. He usually sent Rocco or a driver, but he had texted earlier saying he needed to see me. The mere thought of him, his intensity, the way he looked at me as if I were the only anchor in his chaotic sea, made my knees weak. I keyed in the security code, locking the gallery. The heavy glass doors sealed with a reassuring thud. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, and the city assaulted me. The wind was biting, carrying sheets of freezing rain that instantly soaked the hem of my trench coat. It was a miserable night, the kind where the streetlights blurred into streaks of neon on the wet asphalt. I huddled against the building, scanning the street for the familiar profile of Silvio's armored black SUV. The street was mostly empty, save for a few taxis splashing by. Well, look at what the cat dragged in. The voice came from the left, stepping out of the shadows of the neighboring awning. My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. It was the voice that had criticized my clothes, my laugh, and my dreams for 3 years before I finally found the courage to leave. Brandon. I turned slowly. He was leaning against the brickwork, looking like a caricature of his former self. His blonde hair was slicked back with too much product, wet from the rain. He wore a suit that was too tight, trying to project wealth he didn't have, and his smile was a jagged thing, sharp and unpleasant. Brandon, I said, my voice flat. What are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood. He lied smoothly, pushing off the wall to stand closer to me. He smelled of stale beer and expensive cologne. A nauseating combination. Saw the lights go off. Figured little Chloe was closing up shop. I'm leaving, Brandon. Go away. He chuckled, stepping directly into my path. I tried to sidestep, but he mirrored my movement, blocking me. The street was deserted. A spike of fear went through me, not just for myself, but for the tiny life inside me. My hand drifted toward my purse, toward the pepper spray. Feisty, he sneered. He looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my legs where the trench coat had parted slightly. You look tired, Chloe. Ragged. This job must be running you into the ground. I'm fine, I said through gritted teeth. Move. I heard about your dad, he said, dropping the bomb casually. I froze. What? Brandon smirked, enjoying the reaction. Word gets around. Arthur is in deep with some heavy hitters. I heard he was begging for cash all over town today. Let me guess. Dutiful daughter Chloe bailed him out again. That is none of your business. It makes it my business when I see you wasting your life. He snapped, his voice losing its fake charm. He took another step, invading my personal space. You left me because you said you wanted more. You wanted a real life. And look at you. Standing in the rain, waiting for a cab, paying off your loser father's debts. He reached out, his fingers digging into the sleeve of my coat. I tried to pull away, but his grip was surprisingly strong. Let go of me, I warned, my voice rising. Or what? He laughed, a cruel barking sound. You're going to call the police? I'm just catching up with an old flame. He leaned in closer, his face inches from mine. Be honest, Chloe. You're miserable. You made a mistake leaving me. I'm about to close a huge deal. I could take care of you. I could actually help you with your dad, instead of you throwing money into a pit. I don't need your help, I spat, struggling against his grip. I'm not the same person I was, Brandon. No? He tightened his hold, shaking me slightly. You look the same, scared. Alone. He leaned back, looking at me with a mixture of pity and arrogance that made my blood boil. Tell me, he mocked, his voice dripping with condescension. Still single? The headlights swept over us before I could answer. Twin beams of blinding white light cut through the rain, illuminating the falling droplets like diamonds. A massive black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb, the tires hissing on the wet pavement. It didn't park. It stopped with the aggressive precision of a predator cutting off an escape route. Brandon squinted at the lights, shielding his eyes. Great. Your Uber is here, but we aren't done talking. The driver's side door didn't open. The rear passenger door flew open. A man stepped out. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He unfolded himself from the vehicle with a terrifying, fluid grace. Silvio Zanarello stood 6'3" in the pouring rain, ignoring the water soaking into his bespoke Italian suit. He didn't look at the traffic. He didn't look at the buildings. His dark, almost black eyes were locked onto Brandon's hand, the hand that was still gripping my arm. Silvio's face was a mask of stone. No anger, no rage. Just a cold, absolute void that was infinitely more terrifying than any scream. He moved across the sidewalk in 2 long strides. "Hey, buddy, back off. This is a private—" Brandon started, puffing his chest out. He never finished the sentence. Silvio didn't punch him. He didn't push him. He simply reached out and clamped his hand over Brandon's wrist, the one holding me. Brandon let out a strangled yelp as Silvio applied pressure. It wasn't a struggle. It was mechanics. Silvio squeezed and I heard the sickening pop of cartilage. Brandon's knees buckled, and he released me instantly, doubling over, clutching his wrist to his chest. "Ah! You broke it! You crazy psycho, you broke my wrist!" Brandon screamed, stumbling back against the brick wall, his face draining of color. Silvio didn't blink. He stepped between me and Brandon, turning his back on the threat as if Brandon were no more dangerous than a fly. He looked at me, his dark eyes scanning my face, searching for damage. "Did he touch you anywhere else?" Silvio asked. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder that vibrated in my chest. It was deadly calm. "No," I whispered, my breath hitching. "Just my arm." "I'm okay, Silvio." Silvio nodded once, then slowly turned back to Brandon. Brandon was sliding down the wall, cradling his arm, tears mixing with the rain on his face. He looked up at Silvio, and for the first time, I saw true primal fear in my ex-husband's eyes. He realized, too late, that he wasn't dealing with a jealous boyfriend. He was dealing with a monster. "Do you know who I am?" Silvio asked softly. Brandon shook his head frantically. No, look, man, I was just talking to her. We used to date. It was a misunderstanding." Silvio took a step closer. Brandon flinched violently. "She is not single," Silvio said, each word precise, like a bullet casing hitting the floor. "She is not alone, and she is certainly not available for the likes of you." Silvio leaned down, bringing his face level with Brandon's. The rain plastered Silvio's black hair to his forehead, making his sharp features look even more severe. He looked like a fallen angel, beautiful and devastating. "The air you breathe right now," Silvio whispered, loud enough for only us to hear, "is a courtesy I am extending to you. Do not test my generosity again." "I won't," Brandon sobbed. "I swear, I'm going." Silvio straightened up, his disgust palpable. He didn't touch Brandon again. He didn't need to. He had reduced the man who had tormented me for years into a weeping puddle on the sidewalk in under 30 seconds. Silvio turned to me, and the ice in his eyes melted instantly, replaced by a searing warmth. He reached out, his large warm hand cupping my cheek, his thumb brushing away a raindrop, or maybe a tear. "Get in the car, tesoro," he murmured. The Italian endearment, my treasure, rough and tender in his mouth. "You're freezing." He guided me toward the open door of the SUV, his hand firm on the small of my back. I slid onto the leather seat, the warmth of the interior wrapping around me like a blanket. Silvio followed me in, pulling the door shut and sealing out the rain, the city, and Brandon. The silence inside the armored vehicle was absolute. The driver, a thick-necked man named Enzo, kept his eyes forward, the partition glass raised. It was just us. My heart was still hammering against my ribs, the adrenaline crashing into the reality of what had just happened. I looked at Silvio. He was brushing the water from his jacket, his jaw set tight. I could see the tension radiating off him in waves. He was furious, not at me, but at the situation, at the fact that I had been exposed. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "He was just waiting there. I didn't know. Don't apologize." Silvio cut me off, though his tone was gentle. He reached across the seat and took my hand. his grip possessing. He looked at my wrist where Brandon had grabbed me. There was already a faint redness there. Silvio's eyes darkened, a flash of violence returning to his gaze before he suppressed it. He lifted my wrist to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to the skin. I should have been here sooner. I should have had men posted at the door. You can't guard me every second of the day, Silvio, I said, though tonight proved maybe he should. I can, he countered, his eyes meeting mine. And I will. He pulled me closer, and I went willingly, sliding across the seat until I was tucked against his side. He wrapped his arm around me, creating a cocoon of safety. I rested my head on his shoulder, inhaling the scent of him, rain, expensive wool, and the faint metallic tang of danger. I thought about the envelope in my purse, the secret that lay between us. Tonight had been a close call. If Brandon had been someone else, if he had been a DeLuca associate sent to kidnap me, I shivered, and Silvio's arm tightened. We have a problem, he said, his voice changing, shifting from husband to boss. I pulled back slightly to look at him. What kind of problem? The route to the estate is compromised, he said. Enzo picked up chatter. There are spotters on the highway. We can't go home tonight. My blood ran cold. The DeLucas? Likely, Silvio said. We're diverting to the penthouse. It's secure. We have supplies there. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. You're trembling. Was it him? Did he say something else to you? I shook my head. No, just the cold. It was a lie. I was trembling because the walls were closing in. My father was being threatened. My ex-boyfriend was stalking me and knew about my father's debts. The DeLucas were hunting us on the highway, and amidst all this death and chaos, I was growing a life. I pressed my hand against my stomach again, unseen under the fold of my trench coat. Silvio, I started, my voice wavering. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to blurt it out right now, to share the burden. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. But dumping that truth on him now, with a war already brewing and enemies circling the family, would have yanked his focus in the worst possible way. We needed his head clear, not dragged into the gravity of a child we had barely begun to imagine. But then he pulled his phone out, his brow furrowing as he read a secure message. Rocco is meeting us there. We need to purge the security team. Someone talked. He looked so stressed, the weight of the organization crushing down on his broad shoulders. If I told him now, while we were fleeing to a safe house, while he was hunting a traitor, it might be the distraction that gets him killed. He needed to be sharp. He needed to be the predator I saw on the sidewalk. What is it, Chloe? He asked, sensing my hesitation. He put the phone down, giving me his full attention. I swallowed the truth back down. Nothing. I lied. Just, I'm glad you came when you did. I don't know what I would have done. Silvio leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. I will always come for you. You are my life, Chloe. Without you, none of this matters. His words were meant to be comforting, but they only added to the weight in my chest. If I was his life, what would happen when he found out I had endangered it by keeping this secret? And what would he do to the world to protect the child we had made? The car sped through the rain-slicked streets, carrying us toward safety, but I knew the storm was only just beginning. As we turned a corner, the city lights played across Silvio's face, illuminating the hard lines of a man who commanded armies. I closed my eyes and prayed that his strength would be enough for all three of us. Inside my purse, the phone buzzed again. Another message. I didn't check it, but I knew. It was my father, or maybe Brandon. The past wasn't letting go, and the future was arriving faster than I could handle. Enzo, Silvio commanded. Take the lower tunnels. I don't want to be seen on the bridge. Yes, boss. We descended into the dark underbelly of the city, leaving the rain behind, but taking the danger with us. I gripped Silvio's hand tighter, and he squeezed back. An unbreakable promise in the darkness. But promises were easy to make. Keeping them in a world built on blood and betrayal was a different story entirely. As the tunnel lights flickered overhead, a wave of nausea hit me. Morning sickness arriving early, triggered by the stress. I swallowed hard, willing it away. I couldn't be sick. Not now. Not when I had to be strong. I had to play the part of the supportive wife, the partner, not the liability. "Are you sure you're okay?" Silvio asked, his perception uncannily sharp. "You're pale. Just the adrenaline wearing off," I whispered. "I just need to rest." "Soon," he promised. "We'll be safe soon." Safety. It was such a fragile word. I looked at the man I loved, the father of my unborn child, and wondered if we would ever truly know what it meant again. The interior of the armored SUV was a sealed capsule, separating us from the chaos of the storm and the violence that had just erupted on the sidewalk. The silence was heavy, not with awkwardness, but with the dense, suffocating weight of unsaid things. I watched the city blur past the tinted, bulletproof glass, the neon lights stretching into long ribbons of color against the wet pavement. My wrist, where Brandon had grabbed me, throbbed with a dull ache, a physical reminder of the past I couldn't seem to shake. Silvio sat beside me, his large frame filling the space. He hadn't spoken since we entered the tunnel. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw locked tight enough to grind stone. His hand, however, was resting on my knee, his thumb tracing slow, rhythmic circles against the fabric of my coat. It was a grounding touch, a tether keeping me from floating away into panic, but I could feel the tension vibrating through him. It was a low-frequency hum of lethal energy that hadn't yet dissipated. "Let me see it again," he said, his voice breaking the silence. It was low, rough like gravel. I hesitated, then turned my arm over. He pushed the sleeve of my trench coat up with careful precision. The red marks from Brandon's fingers were beginning to darken, standing out starkly against my pale skin. Silvio stared at the bruising, his eyes narrowing. I saw a flash of that same cold void I had witnessed on the street, the look of a man who calculated retribution in terms of bone and blood. "It looks worse than it feels," I lied softly, trying to de-escalate the violence brewing inside him. "He didn't hurt me, Silvio. He just startled me." "He touched you," Silvio corrected, his tone leaving no room for argument. He lifted my wrist, pressing his lips to the pulse point, his breath warm against my skin. He put his hands on my wife. "In my world, men have been buried for looking at you the wrong way. He is lucky I only took his wrist." "You did more than take his wrist," I pointed out, recalling the sickening sound of the snap. "You terrified him." "Good." Silvio lowered my hand but didn't let go, interlacing his fingers with mine. His grip was firm, possessive. Fear is a language men like him understand. Respect is foreign to them, but pain is universal. I leaned my head back against the headrest, closing my eyes. I should have been repulsed by the casual violence, by the way he spoke of hurting another human being. But I wasn't. God help me, I wasn't. After years of feeling small, of feeling hunted by Brandon's psychological games and my father's financial emotional blackmail, sitting next to a monster who roared on my behalf felt like safety. It was a twisted, dark kind of safety, but it was the only kind that had ever felt real. The car swerved slightly as we merged onto the expressway, and my stomach lurched in protest. The nausea I had suppressed earlier surged back with a vengeance. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to gag. It wasn't just the motion. It was the secret burning a hole in my purse, the white envelope, the 6-week-old reality growing inside me. I looked at Silvio's profile. He was already back in boss mode, his eyes scanning the mirrors, his mind likely running through security protocols and potential retaliation scenarios. If I told him now, if I said, "Silvio, I'm pregnant," the focus would shift instantly. He would stop thinking about the DeLucas and start thinking about cribs, doctors, and islands in the Mediterranean where he could hide me. But we weren't safe yet. I could feel it in the way Enzo, our driver, was gripping the steering wheel. I could feel it in the way the car accelerated, pushing the engine to a low growl. To distract him now would be dangerous. A distracted king loses his crown, and often his head. "Enzo," Silvio said, his voice changing pitch, sharpening. "Why are we in the left lane? The exit for the estate is on the right." Enzo didn't look back. His eyes were darting between the rearview mirror and the dashboard navigation. "I'm seeing a blockage ahead, boss. 2 sedans, stationary, lights off, half a mile from the exit ramp." Silvio's body went rigid, He didn't panic. He simply became more alert, like a wolf catching a scent on the wind. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, tapping the screen with rapid, efficient movements. "Spotters," Silvio murmured. "They're waiting for the choke point." "The DeLucas?" I asked, the nausea forgotten for a split second as cold fear washed over me. "Or hired guns looking for a payday," Silvio replied, not looking up. "It doesn't matter who they are. What matters is they know where we live." He pressed the phone to his ear. "Rocco. The primary route is burned. We have bogies at the exit. Divert all units. We aren't going home." He listened for a moment, his expression darkening. "I don't care how it happened. Just fix it. Initiate Protocol Black. We're going to the Spire." The Spire. I knew the name. It was the penthouse apartment Silvio owned in the center of the city, a fortress in the sky that he kept for contingencies. We had never stayed there. It was a place of last resort, a glass cage for when the ground became too dangerous. The car suddenly banked hard to the left, crossing 3 lanes of traffic with aggressive speed. Horns blared around us, fading quickly as the thick glass insulated us. The sudden motion sent my stomach spinning again. Bile rose in my throat. I clamped a hand over my mouth, making a small, strangled noise. Silvio turned to me instantly, the phone forgotten. "Chloe? I'm fine," I gasped, forcing the bile down. "Just car sick. The swerving. Enzo, smooth it out," Silvio ordered, his voice whipping like a lash. "Trying, boss, but we need to lose the tail just in case." Silvio unbuckled his seatbelt, a move that was statistically more dangerous than the assassin's, but he didn't care, and slid closer to me. He placed a hand on the back of my neck, his fingers cool and soothing. "Breathe, Tesoro," he instructed, his voice low and steady. "Focus on me. Look at me." I opened my eyes and locked onto his. Dark, infinite, and terrifyingly calm. He was the eye of the storm. "We are secure," he promised. "This vehicle can withstand a rocket-propelled grenade. Enzo is the best driver in the state, and I am right here. No one touches you. Do you understand?" I nodded, gripping his lapel with my free hand. "I know. I'm okay. Just water?" Silvio reached into the refrigerated compartment between the seats and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. He cracked the seal and handed it to me. The cold carbonation helped settle the roiling in my gut. I took small sips, grateful for the distraction. "Protocol Black," I whispered, wiping my mouth. "That sounds serious." "It means we go underground for a few days," Silvio said, watching me closely. "It means nobody in or out until we flush the rats." "Rats?" "Someone gave up the route, Chloe." The admission seemed to pain him physically. He looked away, staring out at the rain-streaked window. Only 3 people knew we were taking the bridge tonight. Me, Enzo, and Rocco. I stared at the back of Enzo's head. The driver remained stoic, focused entirely on the road. "You don't think—" I started, keeping my voice a whisper. "Enzo is driving the car," Silvio murmured. "If he wanted us dead, he could have driven us into a wall 10 miles ago. And Rocco, I would trust Rocco with my life." "Then who?" "That," Silvio said, his eyes hardening into flint, "is what I intend to find out. But until I do, I cannot trust the walls of our own home." The rest of the drive was a blur of high-speed turns and back alleys. We entered the city center not through the main avenues, but through the service districts, navigating the labyrinth of steel and concrete, like a ghost ship. Finally, the SUV descended a steep ramp into an unmarked parking garage beneath one of the tallest skyscrapers in the financial district. The garage was empty, save for 2 other armored vehicles parked in strategic positions. Heavy steel shutters slammed down behind us, sealing us in. "We're here," Enzo announced, his voice tight. Silvio opened the door before the vehicle had come to a complete stop. He stepped out, scanning the concrete bunker, his hand hovering near the holster beneath his jacket. He offered a hand to me. "Come." I stepped out, my legs feeling shaky. The air down here was stale and smelled of oil and cold concrete. It felt like a bunker. It was a bunker. We bypassed the main lobby elevators, heading instead toward a heavy steel door marked Maintenance. Silvio placed his palm against a scanner panel. A red laser swept over his hand, followed by a mechanical beep and the heavy clank of locks disengaging. "Biometrics?" I asked, impressed despite the circumstances. "And thermal imaging," he added. If my body temperature was off by 2 degrees, indicating stress or coercion, the door wouldn't open. It would lock down and vent halon gas into the vestibule. I stared at him. "You have a kill room in the basement of a residential building?" "I have a survival room," he corrected, ushering me inside the private elevator. Perspective, Chloe. The ride-up was fast, the pressure change popping my ears. When the doors slid open, we weren't in a hallway. We stepped directly into the penthouse. It was breathtaking and completely soulless. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the storm-lashed city, but the glass was thick, distorted slightly by the laminates that made it bulletproof. The furniture was modern, sharp angles of black leather and chrome. There were no photos, no personal touches, no warmth. It looked like a showroom for a villain in a spy movie, pristine and cold. "Do not go near the windows until I activate the blackout shades," Silvio ordered, moving immediately to a control panel on the wall. I stood in the center of the vast living room, clutching my purse against my stomach. The nausea was back, triggered by the sudden stop of the elevator and the sheer height of the room. "I need the bathroom," I blurted out. Silvio pointed down a long corridor. "First door on the right. The water is filtered. There are fresh towels." I dropped my bag on a black leather ottoman, making sure it didn't tip over, and hurried down the hall. I barely made it. I locked the door, sank to my knees on the cold marble tiles, and retched into the pristine porcelain bowl. Nothing came up but water and acid, but the spasms left me shaking and teary-eyed. I sat back on my heels, resting my forehead against the cool rim. Pregnant. This was the reality of it. Not just cute baby shoes and nursery rhymes, but hiding in a bathroom in a safe house, while my husband secured the perimeter against assassins. "Chloe?" Silvio's voice came from the other side of the door. He was knocking softly. "Are you all right? You've been in there a while." I flushed the toilet and scrambled to the sink, splashing cold water on my face. I grabbed a small bottle of mouthwash from the vanity. It was stocked like a hotel, and gargled quickly. "I'm fine," I called back, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. "Just washing up." The rain made me feel grimy. "I laid out some clothes for you," he said. "In the bedroom. Your dress is wet." "Okay. Give me a minute." I stared at myself in the mirror. My skin was pale, almost translucent, making the dusting of freckles across my nose stand out. I looked terrified. I needed to pull it together. I was Chloe Zanarello. I was the wife of the boss. I couldn't fall apart. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and exited the bathroom. Silvio was waiting in the hallway. He had discarded his wetsuit jacket and his shoulder holster, now wearing just his white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing the intricate tattoos that wrapped around his forearms. He looked weary. "Bedroom is there," he gestured. I walked into the master suite. On the massive king-sized bed lay a robe. It wasn't the plush terry cloth I expected. It was gold silk, shimmering under the recessed lighting. It looked like liquid metal. I stripped off my damp dress, leaving it in a pile on the floor. I felt a moment of vulnerability standing naked in this strange room, my hand drifting automatically to the slight, almost imperceptible curve of my lower belly. "We are going to be okay," I told the tiny cluster of cells. "He won't let anything happen to us." I pulled on the gold robe. It was oversized, clearly meant for a guest, but the silk felt luxurious against my skin. I tied the sash tight, armor of a different kind. When I returned to the living room, the blackout shades had descended, plunging the room into a dim, amber gloom, lit only by the low accent lights. Silvio was standing by a wet bar, pouring a glass of amber liquid. He didn't drink it. He just held the glass, staring into the depths of the whiskey. "Better?" he asked, turning to look at me. His eyes swept over the gold robe, and for a second, the hardness in his face softened. "You look like a queen, even in a crisis." "I don't feel like a queen," I admitted, walking over to him. I feel like a piece on a chessboard that keeps getting moved around without knowing the rules. Silvio set the glass down with a sharp clink. You are not a pawn, Chloe. You are the queen, and the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. That is why they come for her. He reached out, pulling me between his legs as he leaned against the bar. Rocco is on his way. He's scrubbing the team. We're going to find out who sold the root. You said only 3 people knew. I reminded him. You, Enzo, and Rocco. Digital footprints, Silvio said, shaking his head. It could have been a hack, a bug in the car, or... He trailed off, his expression turning pained. Or someone isn't as loyal as you think. I finished for him. Silvio sighed, resting his forehead against my shoulder. The vulnerability of the gesture shocked me. He was exhausted. I hate bringing you into this, he murmured into the silk of my robe. I wanted to keep the gallery separate. I wanted you to have a normal life, Chloe. Art, charity dinners, annoying fathers. Not safe houses and escape tunnels. It's too late for that, I said, running my fingers through his damp hair. I married you, Silvio. All of you. The gallery owner and the Don. He pulled back, searching my face. Tonight, on the street, with Brandon. You weren't afraid of me? No, I said honestly. I was afraid of him. When you showed up, I just felt relief. Silvio studied me for a long moment, as if trying to decipher a code written in my eyes. You are stronger than you think, Chloe Zanarello. Most women would be hysterical right now. You are standing here, calm, asking the right questions. He didn't know I was holding on by a thread. He didn't know about the nausea churning in my stomach or the envelope in my purse that could change everything. I need to work, he said, stepping back, the moment of intimacy ending as duty called. I need to go over the logs. You should sleep. The bedroom is soundproof. You're safe here. I'm not tired, I lied. I couldn't sleep. Not with the adrenaline spiking and crashing in my blood. I'll stay up with you for a bit. Chloe, I'm not going to sit in a room by myself staring at the wall, Silvio, I said firmly. I can help. I know how to look for patterns. I manage inventory logs all day. Numbers are numbers. He looked at me with a mix of amusement and respect. You want to audit the crime syndicate's security logs? I want to find out who tried to get us killed, I said. And I want to know why my husband is looking at his phone like he expects it to bite him. Silvio let out a short, dry laugh. Fine. But you sit on the couch. You rest. If I see you yawning, I'm carrying you to bed. He moved to the dining table, which had transformed into a command center with a laptop and several secure tablets. I sat on the plush leather sofa, wrapping the gold robe tighter around myself. I watched him work. The focused intensity of his face, the way his muscles bunched under his shirt. My laptop was in my bag. The gallery accounts. If there was a leak, if money had changed hands to buy that information, it had to come from somewhere. And if Brandon knew about the root, my mind raced. Brandon was a failure. He had no money, no connections. How did he know I was at the gallery tonight? How did he know about my dad's debts? And how did the spotters know our route? It was all connected. I could feel it, and I had the sinking suspicion that the answer wasn't in Silvio's security logs, but in the financial shadows where I spent my days. I waited until Silvio was deep in a conversation with Rocco on the phone before I quietly reached for my bag. I needed to see. I needed to know if the rot was coming from outside, or if it was growing right in the middle of the life I was trying so hard to protect. Rocco, Silvio barked into the phone, his voice echoing in the large room. I don't care about the encryption. Break it. I want a name. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing blue in the dim room. I want a name too, I thought, and I had a terrible feeling I knew where to look. The heavy steel door clicked shut, sealing Silvio outside in the corridor and leaving me in the expansive silence of the penthouse. He hadn't wanted to go. I had seen the conflict warring behind his dark eyes, the primal need to stand guard over me versus the strategic necessity of hunting down the traitor who had almost cost us our lives. Strategy had won, as it always did with Silvio Zanarello. A dead king couldn't protect his queen. I stood in the center of the living room, the gold silk robe shivering slightly against my skin as the air conditioning cycled on. The space felt too large, too empty, despite the presence of the man standing by the elevator bank. Rocco. He was a mountain of a man, broader even than Silvio, with a shaved head and a neck that seemed to merge directly with his shoulders. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him, staring at the elevator doors as if daring them to open. He hadn't moved a muscle since Silvio left 5 minutes ago. "Rocco," I said, my voice sounding thin in the cavernous room. "You don't have to stand there like a statue. The perimeter is secure, isn't it?" Rocco turned his head slowly, acknowledging me without breaking his vigilance. "Boss said watch the door." I watched the door. "You can watch the door from the couch," I offered, gesturing to the leather sectional that cost more than my first car, a comparison I immediately pushed away. It didn't matter what things cost anymore. It only mattered if they were bulletproof. "I'm going to make coffee. Do you want some?" "No, ma'am. Thank you." He turned back to the elevator. I sighed, realizing that attempting small talk with Rocco was like trying to interview a brick wall. I walked to the kitchen island, the marble cool under my fingertips. I didn't actually want coffee. The nausea from earlier was still lurking at the back of my throat, a constant, nagging reminder of the secret I was harboring. But I needed a task. I needed to move. I poured a glass of water instead, taking small sips as my mind replayed the events of the night. Brandon's face, twisted in pain and fear. The way he had known about my father's debts. The way he had been waiting outside the gallery, smug and confident, just before our route was compromised. Coincidences were rare in my old life. In Silvio's world, they didn't exist. I looked at my purse, sitting on the counter where I had left it. Inside was my laptop. And the envelope. "I want a name," Silvio had said. He was out there breaking encryption, and likely breaking fingers to find the leak. But Silvio looked at the world through the lens of territories and soldiers. He saw enemies in terms of rival families and hired guns. I saw the world differently. I saw it in ledgers, in wire transfers, in the desperate arithmetic of people like my father who tried to solve subtraction problems with addition. I pulled the laptop out, the aluminum casing cold in my hands. I carried it to the dining table, sitting with my back to the wall, facing Rocco and the entry points. It was a habit I had picked up from Silvio without even realizing it. I opened the gallery's secure server. The screen flared to life, casting a blue glow over the table. "Ma'am?" Rocco's voice was deep, startled. "Boss said you should sleep." "I can't sleep, Rocco," I said, my fingers already flying across the keyboard. "And since I'm awake, I might as well be useful. Unless you have orders to confiscate my computer?" Rocco hesitated, clearly weighing his instructions. "No orders about computers, just safety." "Then I'm safe," I said, not looking up. "Keep watching the door." I logged into the gallery's shadow accounts. Officially, the Zanarello Gallery was a legitimate business. Unofficially, it moved significant amounts of capital that needed to be cleaned. I knew the flows better than anyone. I knew every vendor, every contractor, every cleaning service. If someone had sold us out, money had changed hands. Information like the boss's travel route wasn't given away for free. It was a high-value commodity. I started with the obvious. The security team. Enzo's payroll, Rocco's, the shift guards. Nothing. Their accounts were clean, steady, loyal. Silvio paid them enough that bribery would have to be astronomical to turn them. I widened the search. Who else knew the schedule? The gallery staff didn't know Silvio was picking me up. I hadn't told anyone. But Brandon had been there, waiting. I opened a new tab, accessing a public records database that Silvio had given me a backdoor key to. It wasn't legal, but it was thorough. I typed in Brandon Miller. The results were pathetic. A string of maxed-out credit cards, an eviction notice from 6 months ago, and a failed business filing for a consulting firm called BM Strategies. He was drowning. He had no assets, no leverage. So how did he afford the suit he was wearing tonight? How did he know about my father's 10K debt? My father. My stomach clenched. Not from morning sickness this time, but from a sickening drop of intuition. I opened another window and pulled up my father's financials. I had his banking passwords. He had given them to me years ago during one of his "I'm going to change" phases so I could monitor his spending. I hadn't looked in months, afraid of what I'd find. I logged in. The balance was negligible. The $10,000 I had sent him earlier was there, sitting in the pending transactions. But then I saw it. A series of small deposits over the last 3 weeks. 500 here, 200 there, just enough to keep him afloat, keep him gambling. The source of the deposits was a generic LLC, Veritas Holdings. I traced Veritas Holdings. It was a shell company, registered in Delaware, with a mailing address that routed to a P.O. box in Jersey City. Dead end. Standard procedure for anyone trying to hide money. But then I saw the timestamp on the most recent deposit to my father, unrelated to the one I sent. It was from 3 days ago. I went back to the gallery logs. I cross-referenced Veritas Holdings with our vendor list. Nothing. I sat back, rubbing my temples. I was missing something. The connection between Brandon, my father, and the attack. They were the 2 weak points in my armor. The only 2 people outside the organization who knew me well enough to predict my movements. Think, Chloe. You're the wife of a kingpin. Think like a predator. Brandon had mocked me. Still single? He was trying to provoke a reaction. He wanted to know if Silvio was in the picture. Why? To confirm the target. I went back to Brandon's consulting firm, BM Strategies. I ran a deep search on its recent activity. It was dormant, dead in the water. But wait, there was a registered affiliate added 2 weeks ago. A partner entity. Veritas Holdings. My breath hitched. Brandon was listed as a signatory for the shell company that was feeding my father gambling money. The pieces slammed together with terrifying clarity. Brandon wasn't just a bitter ex. He had been recruited. Someone, the DeLucas, almost certainly, had found him. They had used his hatred of me and his desperation for money. They gave him cash to set up a shell company. Then, Brandon used that company to feed my father's addiction, buying his loyalty, or, more likely, his loose tongue. My father didn't need to be a mastermind. He just needed to be drunk and talkative. Brandon gets him drunk. Asks about little Chloe. Asks about her rich husband. When does he pick her up? What car does he drive? And tonight, Brandon was the spotter. He wasn't there to win me back. He was there to confirm I was leaving the gallery so the hit squad on the highway knew the timeline. The still single comment wasn't a taunt. It was a verification of identity and accompaniment. I looked at the clock on my laptop. The timestamp of the ambush on the highway matched perfectly with a ping from Brandon's cell phone tower data, which I could see now that I linked him to the shell company. I had the proof. I had the name. "Rocco," I said, standing up, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I need to call Silvio, now." Rocco turned, his brow furrowing. "Boss is in a secure meeting. Radio silence unless it's an emergency." "This is an emergency," I said, grabbing the laptop. "I know how they found us. It wasn't a leak in your team. It was..." The lights went out. It wasn't a flicker. It was an instantaneous, absolute plunge into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator died. The air conditioning unit groaned and silenced. The blue light of my laptop screen was the only illumination in the sudden, suffocating void. "Get down!" Rocco roared, his voice booming in the dark. I heard the distinct sound of a slide racking back on a heavy weapon. Rocco was moving, his heavy boots thudding against the floorboards. "What's happening?" I whispered, dropping into a crouch behind the kitchen island. "Power cut!" Rocco barked. "Systems are down. This isn't a storm outage." The backup generator should have kicked in instantly. The generator didn't kick in. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. They hacked the building, I realized, the horror washing over me. Silvio said this place was a fortress. A fortress with electronic locks. Rocco growled from somewhere near the door. "Ma'am, stay exactly where you are. Do not move." I stared at my laptop. The signal bars in the corner vanished. Wi-Fi was gone. I pulled my phone from my pocket. No service. They were jamming the signals. We were blind, deaf, and trapped in a glass box 50 stories in the sky. "Rocco, they're coming," I said, my voice trembling but my mind surprisingly clear. If they cut the power, they bypassed the biometric scanners on the elevator. I know, he said. I'm watching the elevator manual release. I looked down at myself. The gold silk robe. I was barefoot. I was pregnant. And I was about to be in the middle of a war zone. The baby. A fierce, white-hot instinct flared in my chest. I couldn't just crouch here and wait for Rocco to save me. Rocco was one man. If a team was coming up that elevator, he would be overwhelmed. I needed to get to the panic room. Rocco, the panic room, I hissed. Is it electronic? Hydraulic manual override inside the master closet, Rocco shouted back, never taking his eyes off the entrance. Go, now! I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my laptop, evidence, I couldn't leave it, and scrambled to my feet. I ran toward the hallway, the silk of my robe flowing behind me like a ghost. The darkness was absolute in the corridor, but I knew the layout from the brief tour Silvio had given me. I burst into the master bedroom. I fumbled for my purse on the ottoman where I'd left it earlier. My fingers closed around the strap. The envelope. The medical envelope was inside. I couldn't risk losing it. Couldn't risk it falling out during a struggle. With shaking hands, I ripped the envelope out of the bag. I folded it in half, then in half again, and shoved it inside the bodice of my robe, pressing it flat against my skin, right over my heart, held in place by my bra. It scratched against me, a rough reminder of what I was fighting for. You are not a pawn, Silvio had said. You are the queen. I ran to the walk-in closet. It was massive, lined with shelves of suits Silvio rarely wore. In the back, behind a rack of winter coats, was a false panel. I found the latch by touch, my fingers scrabbling against the wood. It clicked, and the panel swung open. Behind it was a heavy steel door with a manual wheel, like a submarine hatch. I grabbed the cold metal wheel. It was heavy, resistant. I put my shoulder into it, gritting my teeth, straining against the mechanism. It groaned, metal grinding on metal, and began to turn. Crash. The sound of the penthouse front door exploding inward echoed through the apartment. It wasn't the elevator. They had blown the service stairwell access. Contact! Rocco yelled. Then, the deafening rat-a-tat-tat of automatic gunfire erupted in the living room. I screamed, a short, sharp sound that I swallowed instantly. I couldn't freeze. I pulled the panic room door open. It was dark inside. Wait! I stopped. I looked at the dark safety of the steel box. Then I looked back at the bedroom. The safe. Silvio had a wall safe behind the painting opposite the bed. He had shown me the combination. If you ever need it, Chloe, it's there. If I went into the panic room unarmed, I was just waiting to be dug out. If they had tech to hack the building, they might have tech to drill the door eventually. I needed a way to fight back. The gunfire in the living room was intense. Rocco was laying down hate, buying me seconds. I couldn't waste them. I turned away from the panic room and ran back into the bedroom. I scrambled over the bed, knocking a lamp to the floor. I tore the abstract painting off the wall, the canvas ripping. The keypad was faint in the gloom. I punched in the numbers by feel. 1984. The lock beeped. A battery backup, thank God. And the small door popped open. Inside lay a matte black Glock 19 and 2 spare magazines. I grabbed the gun. It was heavier than I remembered from the range session Silvio had forced me to attend. Grip it high. His voice echoed in my memory. Don't anticipate the recoil. Just squeeze. I checked the chamber. Loaded. I grabbed the magazines and shoved them into the deep pockets of the robe. The gunfire in the living room paused. Clear, a voice shouted. Not Rocco's voice. My heart stopped. Check the rooms. Find her. The boss wants her alive, the stranger commanded. Rocco. Was he dead? Had they killed the mountain? I didn't have time to grieve. I slid off the bed and sprinted back to the closet. Footsteps were thudding down the hallway. Heavy, tactical boots. They were coming. I threw myself into the closet, scrambling past the coats. I squeezed through the opening of the panic room. I grabbed the internal wheel to seal the door. A beam of a tactical flashlight cut through the darkness of the bedroom, sweeping across the open closet door. In here! a voice shouted. I spun the wheel. The heavy steel door began to close, the gears mesmerizingly slow. I saw a figure appear in the doorway of the closet, a silhouette against the flashlight beam. He raised a rifle. I didn't think. I raised the Glock, holding it with both hands as Silvio taught me, and fired blindly into the gap. Bang! The recoil jarred my shoulder. The noise was thunderous in the confined space. I didn't see if I hit him, but the figure flinched back, seeking cover. That second was all I needed. I slammed the wheel home. The locking bolts engaged with a heavy, final thud clank. I spun the wheel to jam the lock. I was sealed in. I fell back against the cold metal floor, gasping for air, the gun still clutched in my hand, the barrel smoking slightly. My chest was heaving. I could hear them outside now, muffled shouting, the sound of rifle butts striking the steel door. Open it! Set the charges! I scrambled away from the door, deeper into the panic room. It was a small space, maybe 6 by 6 feet. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in a harsh red glow. There was a bench, a supply crate, and a bank of monitors on the wall. I dragged myself up to the monitors. They were wired to hardline cameras, independent of the building's hacked system. The screens flickered to life. I saw the bedroom I had just fled. 3 men in full tactical gear, faces covered by balaclavas, were examining the panic room door. One of them was setting a strip of C4 explosive on the hinges. They weren't DeLucas. The DeLucas were messy, loud. These men moved with military precision. They were mercenaries, high-end, expensive, and on the floor of the living room, I scanned the other monitor. The living room was a wreck, furniture overturned, drywall shredded. But there was no body. Rocco wasn't there. There was a trail of blood leading behind the kitchen island, but no corpse. He might be alive. He might have retreated. I looked down at myself. The gold robe was stained with dust from the closet floor. My hand was shaking so hard the gun rattled against the bench. I placed it down carefully. I reached into my robe, my hand trembling as I touched the skin over my heart. I pulled out the envelope. It was crumpled, bent at the corners, but intact. I pressed it to my lips. A silent prayer. We are still here, I whispered to the empty room. We are still here. On the screen, the man signaled his team. They were ready to blow the door. I grabbed the gun again and moved to the corner of the room, behind the heavy steel reinforcements. I pointed the muzzle at the door. If they blew it, if they came in, I had 15 rounds in the magazine. I wouldn't go quietly. I was Mrs. Silvio Zanarello. I was the mother of his heir. And I would burn the world down before I let them touch me. Suddenly, on the living room monitor, the elevator doors, the ones that had been hacked shut, forced open with a screech of tortured metal. A hand, large and bloody, gripped the frame. Silvio. He wasn't waiting for the software to be fixed. He had pried the doors open with brute force. He pulled himself into the room, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with grime and... Was that blood? He scanned the room, his face a mask of absolute, terrifying fury. He saw the mercenaries in the hallway. He didn't take cover. He drew 2 handguns from his waistband and began to walk forward, firing with a rhythmic, mechanical cadence. Bam, bam, bam. I watched on the screen, mesmerized. He was death incarnate. He was my husband. Silvio. I breathed, my hand touching the cold screen. The mercenary at my door turned, hearing the commotion behind him. He didn't have time to react. I watched as the battle for my life began, separated by 3 inches of steel and a black and white monitor. But in my mind, I was running the numbers again. Brandon, the shell company, the timing. If we survived this, if Silvio survived this, the person responsible wasn't going to get a trial. I gripped the gun tighter. Come and get me, I thought. My husband is home. The monitor flickered with static before stabilizing, revealing the grainy black and white nightmare unfolding in my own living room. I watched. My breath caught in a throat raw from silent screaming, as Silvio moved through the debris of the penthouse like a storm made flesh. The screen showed him advancing on the mercenaries, his movements precise, brutal, and terrifyingly efficient. There was no hesitation in him, no fear, only a singular, destructive purpose that turned my blood to ice, even as it ignited a fierce pride in my chest. He was a monster, but he was my monster. The gunfire outside the heavy steel door of the panic room had ceased, replaced by the heavy, ominous silence of the aftermath. I gripped the Glock 19 with sweaty palms, my knuckles white, pointing the muzzle at the wheel of the door. I knew it was Silvio out there. I had seen him on the screen. But instinct, primitive and screaming, told me not to lower my guard until I saw his face with my own eyes. "Chloe!" His voice roared through the layers of steel, muffled but unmistakable. It wasn't the smooth, commanding baritone I heard over dinner. It was a raw, jagged sound, torn from the throat of a man who thought he had lost everything. "I'm here," I screamed back, my voice cracking. "I'm in the vault!" I heard the heavy screech of the outer locking mechanism. The wheel in the center of the door began to turn from the outside. I scrambled backward, lowering the gun but keeping it within reach, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The envelope tucked inside my robe scratched against my skin, a constant, physical reminder of the stakes. The door swung open with a groan of heavy hinges. Silvio filled the doorway. The hallway light behind him cast him in silhouette. But as he stepped into the red emergency lighting of the panic room, the details leaped out at me. His white dress shirt was ruined, splattered with grime and dark wet spots that I prayed weren't his blood. His hair was wild, falling over his forehead, and his chest was heaving, but it was his eyes that undid me. They were wide, frantic, scanning the small space until they landed on me huddled in the corner. Chloe. He crossed the distance between us in a single stride, dropping to his knees. He didn't care about the gun on the floor. He didn't care about the tactical situation. He grabbed me, his hands patting down my arms, my shoulders, my face, searching for injuries with desperate intensity. "Did they touch you? Are you hurt? Tell me. I'm okay," I gasped, the air rushing back into my lungs in a sob. "I'm okay, Silvio." I locked the door. I fired a shot. They didn't get in. He pulled me into his chest, burying his face in my neck. I could feel him shaking, a fine, high-frequency tremor that vibrated through his rigid muscles. He smelled of cordite, sweat, and copper. It was the scent of violence. But I clung to him, wrapping my arms around his broad back, burying my hands in his ruined shirt. I thought. He trailed off, his voice thick. He pulled back, gripping my face between his large, rough hands. When I saw the door, when I heard the breach charges, "I'm here," I repeated, trying to anchor him. "We're safe. Rocco is down," he said, the words harsh. He took 2 rounds to the vest and 1 to the leg. He held the line as long as he could. He's alive. Medics are incoming. But we have to move. This location is burned." He stood up, pulling me with him. The sudden motion was a mistake. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the last 20 minutes suddenly evaporated, leaving a cavernous void in its wake. My vision tunneled, the edges turning gray and fuzzy. The room tilted dangerously to the left. A wave of nausea, sharper and more violent than before, crashed over me. "Chloe?" Silvio's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. My knees gave way. I felt myself falling, the floor rushing up to meet me, but I never hit it. Silvio caught me, his arm sweeping under my knees, scooping me up against his chest as if I weighed nothing. "Enzo, get the medic up here, now!" Silvio roared, his voice deafening. The world was spinning. I tried to speak, to tell him it was just the stress, but my tongue felt heavy. As my head lolled back against his shoulder, the silk robe loosened. The friction of the movement dislodged the envelope I had hidden so carefully against my heart. It slipped out. I felt it go. I tried to grab it, my hand flapping uselessly in the air, but my coordination was gone. The white envelope fluttered down, landing on the metal floor of the panic room with a soft slap that seemed to echo louder than the gunshots. Silvio froze. He looked down. The red emergency light reflected off the glossy white paper. The logo of the obstetrics clinic was clearly visible, facing up. Time seemed to stop. The chaos of the penthouse, the shouting of the reinforcements arriving in the hallway, the smell of smoke, it all faded into the background. There was only Silvio, me, and the piece of paper that held our future. No, I whispered, the word barely a breath. Silvio didn't move for a second. Then, slowly, carefully, he shifted my weight to one arm, holding me securely against his hip. He knelt down, his movements fluid despite the violence he had just dispensed. He reached out and picked up the envelope. He stood up, his eyes never leaving the paper. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. He recognized the clinic's name. He saw the confidential patient results stamp. He looked at me. The frantic energy from the battle was gone, replaced by a stillness that was absolute. His dark eyes searched mine, seeing the truth written in my exhaustion, in the pale cast of my skin, in the protective way I had curled around myself even while fainting. "Chloe," he said, his voice unrecognizable. It was soft, shattered. "Silvio, The darkness claimed me then, dragging me down into a blissful, silent void where there were no guns, no debts, and no envelopes. When I opened my eyes, the lighting had changed. I wasn't in the red gloom of the panic room anymore. I was lying on the massive bed in the master suite. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. My arm stung. I looked down to see a small bandage on the inside of my elbow. An IV line had been inserted and then removed. I sat up, a rush of dizziness making me sway. "Careful." Silvio was sitting in the armchair in the corner of the room, deep in the shadows. He wasn't wearing his ruined shirt anymore. He had changed into a black t-shirt that clung to his chest, emphasizing the tension in his frame. He held a glass of water in one hand and the crumpled white envelope in the other. "Drink," he commanded softly, holding out the glass. I took it, my hands trembling slightly. The water was cool and clean. I drained half the glass before I dared to look at him again. "You read it," I stated. It wasn't a question. Silvio looked down at the paper in his hand. He smoothed a crease with his thumb, his touch reverent. 6 weeks, he murmured. "You were going to tell me tonight." "Yes," I said, my voice gathering strength. "Before the rain, before Brandon, before everything went to hell." He stood up and walked to the edge of the bed. He didn't sit. He loomed over me, his presence overwhelming. "You were in a firefight," he said, his voice rising, the anger finally bleeding through. "You were running through a kill zone. You were holding a gun, with my child inside you. I did what I had to do to survive." I shot back, setting the glass on the nightstand with a sharp clink. "I wasn't going to wait for them to blow the door. You should have been nowhere near this," he shouted, turning away and pacing the length of the room, running a hand through his hair. "I brought you here. I put you in this box. I exposed you to this. You didn't know," I argued. "It is my job to know." He spun around, his face a mask of torture. "Do you understand how close we came? If that door hadn't held, if that mercenary had been faster..." He choked on the words, unable to finish the thought. He walked back to the bed and sat down heavily on the edge, the mattress dipping under his weight. He reached out and placed his hand on my stomach over the silk robe. His heat seeped through the fabric. "A baby," he whispered, the anger draining out of him as quickly as it had come, leaving only naked terror. "We are having a baby." I covered his hand with mine. "We are." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "I cannot protect you here, Chloe. Not now. Not with the DeLucas moving like this. Silvio..." "No." He cut me off, his voice hardening with resolve. "I have a plane waiting at Teterboro. You are leaving tonight. I have a villa in Sicily near Palermo. It's a fortress. My mother's family is there. You will be safe. You will stay there until the baby is born." My heart plummeted. I knew he would say this. It was the logical move. The safe move. But it was the wrong move. Putting an ocean between us wouldn't make me any less of a target. It would only leave me frightened and alone on a plane, in a villa every enemy already knew he owned, too far away for him to reach me if something went wrong. "No," I said. Silvio blinked, as if he hadn't heard me correctly. "Excuse me?" I said no, I repeated, pushing myself up until I was sitting straighter against the headboard. I am not going to Sicily. I am not going to hide on an island while you fight a war here. This is not a negotiation, Chloe. He stood up again, his dominance flaring. This is a war. You are a civilian. You are pregnant. You are a target. You go where I say you go because I am your husband and I need to know you are breathing. And if I leave, you lose, I said calmly. He stared at me. What are you talking about? Pass me my bag, I said, pointing to the ottoman where my purse had been recovered. Chloe, stop playing games. Give me the bag, Silvio, I snapped, matching his intensity. He paused, surprised by the steel in my voice. He grabbed the bag and tossed it onto the bed. I dug through it and pulled out my laptop. I prayed the battery had survived. It booted up, the screen casting a pale light on the duvet. You were looking for a leak, I said, typing in my password. You were tearing apart your team. You were looking for a traitor inside the organization. And I will find them, he growled. I already did, I said. I turned the laptop around so he could see the screen. Silvio frowned, looking at the spreadsheet I had compiled before the power was cut. What is this? This, I pointed to the highlighted column, is a shell company called Veritas Holdings. They've been funneling money to my father for 3 weeks. Gambling debts. Just enough to keep him hooked. Silvio's face went deadly still. Your father? Keep looking, I urged. Look who the signatory is for the affiliate company. Silvio leaned in, his eyes scanning the data. He saw the name. Brandon Miller. He straightened up slowly, the air in the room changing. It wasn't the hot anger of before. It was the cold, calculating focus of the boss. Brandon, he said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. The ex-boyfriend. He's working for them, I explained, the words tumbling out now that he was listening. He wasn't just waiting outside the gallery to harass me. He was the spotter. He confirmed the timeline. He knew the route because he pumped my father for information. Dad probably bragged about your car, about the schedule, about how safe I was. Brandon used that to coordinate the ambush on the highway. Silvio looked from the screen to me, putting the pieces together. The spotters, the timing, it came from outside. Not my men. Your men are loyal, I said firmly. Rocco is loyal. Enzo is loyal. You were chasing ghosts in your own house, Silvio. The threat came from my past. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. Your father sold us out? He didn't know, I said, though the defense tasted bitter. He's weak. He thought he was just getting free money. But Brandon knew. Silvio walked to the window, staring at the closed blackout shades. I should have killed him on the sidewalk. I broke his wrist and I let him walk away. You didn't know, I said, but now we do. He turned back to me. This changes nothing about Sicily. In fact, it makes it worse. If they are using your father, they have leverage. They will use him to get to you again. Exactly, I said, which is why I have to stay. Are you insane? Silvio, listen to me. I threw the covers off my legs. They think I'm just the girlfriend. They think I'm a weakness. Brandon thinks he has an inside track because of my dad. If you send me away, they'll know you're spooked. They'll go underground. You'll never find the DeLuca leadership. I took a breath, playing the card I knew would work. But if I stay, if we play this right, I am the bait. Absolutely not. Silvio snarled instantly. Never. We don't tell them I know. I pressed on, ignoring his refusal. We act like everything is normal. We announce our engagement. A big, public party. We draw them out. Brandon won't be able to resist. He'll come to gloat or to get more intel. And when he leads us to his handlers, you crush them. Silvio stared at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. He looked at the curve of my stomach, then up to my eyes. You are pregnant, he said slowly. You are carrying my son, and you want to offer yourself as a lure to the people who just tried to execute us? I want to end this, I said fiercely. I don't want to raise this baby looking over my shoulder. I don't want to live on an island while my father gambles away my safety. I want the DeLucas gone. And I am the only one who can get close enough to Brandon to make him slip up. Silvio walked back to the bed, He sat down and took my hands in his. His grip was iron. "You are terrifying," he whispered, a mixture of awe and horror in his voice. "You look like an angel, but you think like a general. I learned from the best," I said softly. He brought my hands to his lips, kissing my knuckles, then my palms. He rested his forehead against our joined hands. I could feel the battle raging inside him. The husband who wanted to lock me in a tower versus the Don who saw the tactical brilliance of the plan. "If we do this," he said, his voice low, "you do not leave my sight. Not for a second. If you are the bait, I am the hook, and the line is very, very short. I can live with that," I said. He looked up, his eyes burning with intensity. "And your father?" "If he is the leak, even unwittingly, he is a liability. You know what happens to liabilities." I swallowed hard. "Handle him, Silvio. Secure him. But don't kill him. Not yet. We might need him to feed disinformation to Brandon." Silvio nodded slowly. "You are ruthless, Mia Regina," he said, "my queen," with something like awe and resignation. "I'm a mother," I corrected him, placing his hand back on my stomach. "I'm protecting what's mine." Silvio leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, searing, a claiming of life in the face of death. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "We will do it your way," he conceded. "We will announce the engagement. We will throw the biggest gala this city has ever seen. And we will bury them all." He stood up, the energy returning to him, focused now. He walked to the door and opened it. "Enzo!" he barked into the hallway. "Get me a secure line to the council, and get a team to pick up Arthur Foster. Quietly. Bag and tag him. Bring him to the warehouse." "Yes, boss." Silvio turned back to me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Sharp, dangerous, and devastatingly handsome. Get dressed, Chloe," he said. "We have a wedding to plan." I watched him go, feeling the weight of the decision settle on my shoulders. I looked at the envelope on the nightstand. I picked it up and slid it back into my purse, right next to the gun I had taken from the safe. Partners. We were partners now, and God help anyone who tried to come between us. The fabric of the dress was like liquid mercury, a silver metallic silk that cascaded down my body, clinging to curves I hadn't realized I possessed until Silvio Zanarello looked at them. Standing in front of the full-length mirror in the dressing room of the penthouse, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. The copper-red waves of my hair were pinned up in an intricate, severe style that exposed the long line of my neck. My makeup was sharper, darker than my usual gallery manager aesthetic. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a weapon sheathed in precious metal. "Turn around." Silvio's voice came from the doorway. I turned slowly. He was leaning against the frame, dressed in a tuxedo that fit him with the kind of architectural precision only Italian tailoring could achieve. But unlike the other times I had seen him in formal wear, tonight he didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a warlord preparing for a diplomatic execution. He walked into the room, his eyes scanning every inch of me, lingering on the open back of the dress where the silver fabric dipped dangerously low. He stopped behind me, his hands settling on my waist, his thumbs pressing into the silk. "You look breathtaking," he murmured, his breath ghosting over my shoulder, and entirely too exposed. "That's the point, isn't it?" I replied, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "I'm the bait. Bait has to be shiny. It has to catch the light. I hate this plan," he growled, the vibration traveling from his chest to my back. "Every instinct I have is screaming to lock you in this room and weld the door shut. And let Brandon win?" I countered, turning in his arms to face him. "Let the DeLucas keep hunting us? We tried it your way, Silvio. We tried hiding. It almost got us killed. Now we try my way. We control the narrative." He sighed, a sound of deep frustration, but he nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. For a second, my heart skipped. Was this a prop for the engagement announcement? He opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond ring. It was a pair of diamond earrings, elegant drops that caught the light. "Turn," he instructed. I presented my ear. As he fastened the earring, I felt a tiny, cold weight settle against my lobe. The left one contains a high-frequency transmitter. He explained quietly. It bypasses the standard jamming frequencies used at these events. If you tap it twice, my team breaches the perimeter and extracts you. Lethal force authorized. No questions asked. I won't need it, I said, though the weight of the device was a comfort. You will wear it, he commanded, fastening the right one. And you will take this. He handed me a clutch purse. It matched the dress, a hard-shell silver case. It felt heavy. I opened it. Inside, nestled next to a tube of lipstick and a compact mirror, was a micro-compact pistol. A SIG P238. It's loaded. Safety is on, he said. Do not hesitate, Chloe. If he touches you, if he tries to move you to a secondary location, you put 2 rounds in his stomach. Am I clear? Crystal, I whispered, snapping the purse shut. And the tracker? I held up my left hand. On my finger was a massive diamond ring, a prop from his family vault, flashy enough to be seen from space. But tucked into the palm of my hand was a small adhesive disc, no larger than a dime. Ready to plant, I said. Silvio took my hand, kissing the knuckles' white-knuckled grip. Let's go get engaged. The drive to the Rossi estate was silent. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city slick and glistening. The Rossi family, Switzerland in our local war, was hosting the gala. It was neutral ground, which meant weapons were supposedly banned, but everyone knew the real power players brought their own security. As we pulled up to the grand entrance, flashbulbs erupted like a strobe light storm. The press was here in force, tipped off about a major announcement from the Zanarello family. Stay close, Silvio murmured as the door opened. We stepped out onto the red carpet. The noise was deafening. Reporters shouting questions, cameras clicking. I plastered a radiant smile on my face, leaning into Silvio as if I were drunk on love rather than adrenaline. He slipped his arm around my waist, his grip firm, guiding me through the gauntlet. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and treachery. I scanned the room immediately, my eyes bypassing the politicians and socialites, hunting for the predator. Do you see him? Silvio asked, his voice low, his lips barely moving near my ear. Not yet, I replied, taking a glass of champagne from a passing tray, a prop I wouldn't drink. Your father is at the bar, Silvio noted, his tone cooling. 10 o'clock. I looked. Arthur Foster was there, nursing a tumbler of scotch. He looked terrible. His suit was ill-fitting, and he was sweating despite the cool air conditioning. He kept glancing around the room, his eyes darting nervously. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner. He looks scared, I said, feeling a pang of pity mixed with the anger. He should be. Silvio replied ruthlessly. He's swimming with sharks and he's bleeding. We circulated the room, the happy couple. We accepted congratulations, shook hands, played the part. Every interaction was a calculation. I laughed at jokes I didn't hear, my mind focused entirely on the hunt. Then, I saw him. Brandon was standing near a pillar on the far side of the room, near the terrace doors. He was watching us. He held a drink, his posture relaxed, arrogant. He looked nothing like the weeping coward Silvio had broken on the sidewalk days ago. He looked confident. Funded. Target acquired, I whispered. 3 o'clock, by the terrace. Silvio stiffened. I see him. Stay here, I said. I need to do this alone. If you're hovering, he won't make a move. Chloe. Trust me. I cut him off. Watch from here. If I tap my ear, you come. I pulled away from Silvio before he could stop me. I could feel his gaze burning into my back as I wove through the crowd, heading toward the ladies' room. A path that would take me directly past Brandon. I slowed my pace as I neared him, letting my gaze drift over the crowd until it accidentally landed on him. I widened my eyes in feigned surprise, then fear. I hesitated, acting like I was considering turning back. Brandon pushed off the pillar and intercepted me. Chloe, he said, his voice smooth, oily, You clean up nice. Better than the wet rat look from the other night. Brandon, I said, pitching my voice to sound tremulous. Please. Silvio is watching. If he sees you, let him watch. Brandon sneered, glancing over my shoulder. He can't touch me here. Rossi's rules. Neutral ground. Besides, he looks busy. I glanced back. Silvio was being cornered by a senator, though I knew his attention was entirely on us. What do you want? I asked, clutching my purse tighter. Why are you here? I'm moving up in the world, Chloe, he said, taking a step closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of scotch and mint. Got some new backers. People who appreciate talent. Unlike you. You're delusional, I said. You're playing a game you don't understand. Oh, I understand it fine. He laughed softly. I understand that your husband has a big target on his back. And I understand that you're the bullseye. He reached out, his hand brushing my bare arm. It took everything in me not to recoil. Still single? He mocked, repeating the phrase from that night. Or are you going to tell me this engagement is real? I know you, Chloe. You don't love him. You love safety. You're just a gold digger looking for the biggest vault. I love him, I said, stepping closer to him, closing the distance. And he protects me. Something you never did. Brandon's face twisted with anger. He grabbed my upper arm, gentler than before, mindful of the crowd, but possessive. He can't protect you from what's coming. You picked the losing side, babe. Let go of me. I hissed, feigning a struggle. I pulled my arm back sharply, stumbling slightly in my heels. As I regained my balance, I reached out as if to steady myself, my hand landing flat against the lapel of his tuxedo jacket. Don't touch me again, I said, pushing him away. Or what? He smirked. Or I'll tell everyone here that you're wearing a rental, I spat, channeling the old Chloe, the one who used to argue with him about money. I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart hammering in my throat. I didn't look back. I walked straight to the ladies' room, pushed through the door, and leaned against the marble sink, exhaling a shaky breath. I looked at my left hand. The adhesive disc was gone. It was on him, under the lapel, tucked against the wool where he wouldn't feel it. I tapped my earring once. A signal check. I have him. Silvio's voice came through instantly, clear as a bell. Tracker is active. Audio is live. Good work, Tesoro. Now get back to me before I burn this building down. I checked my reflection. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes bright. I looked like a woman in love, or a woman who had just planted a bomb. I left the bathroom. As I crossed the floor back to Silvio, I saw my father again. He wasn't at the bar anymore. He was moving toward the terrace doors, the same ones Brandon was standing near. My stomach dropped. Silvio, I whispered into the air. My father. He's moving toward Brandon. I see it, Silvio replied. Don't engage. Come to me. We monitor from the car. We need the conversation. I reached Silvio. He took my hand immediately, pulling me into his side. Smile, he ordered softly. We have an announcement to make. We walked to the stage. The band stopped. Silvio took the microphone. He looked at the crowd, then at me, with a look of such intense possession that the room went silent. They say power is the only currency that matters, Silvio said, his voice amplifying through the hall. But they are wrong. Loyalty is the currency of kings. And tonight I am the richest man in the world. He raised my hand, the diamond ring flashing under the chandeliers. To my future wife, Chloe. The room erupted in applause. Flashbulbs blinded me. I smiled, waving, playing the part of the adored fiancé. But my eyes were locked on the terrace doors. Brandon was gone. My father was gone. They were outside. Together. Let's go, Silvio whispered, dropping the microphone. We have them. We exited the ballroom through the kitchen service entrance, avoiding the press. The armored SUV was waiting. We dove into the back seat. Enzo, get us clear. Rocco, give me the feed, Silvio barked. Rocco, battered but refusing to stay in the hospital, was in the front seat with a tactical tablet. He handed me a headset. Signal is strong, boss. They're in the garden maze, No ambient noise. I put the headset on. The silence of the car was replaced by the rustle of wind in leaves and the heavy breathing of two men. "I can't do it, Brandon." A voice whined. A voice I knew better than my own. "It's too much. They have armed guards everywhere." "Shut up, Arthur," Brandon's voice cut through, distorted slightly by the fabric of his jacket. "You already took the money. You spent it. There's no backing out." I closed my eyes, a single tear escaping. "Dad, but the blueprints," my father stammered. "If I give you the electrical schematics, people could die. Chloe is there. She's at the gallery every day. Chloe won't be there." Brandon lied smoothly. "We just want the vault. It's a heist, Arthur. Nobody gets hurt. We cut the power, we blow the safe, we leave. Your daughter loses a few paintings. Insurance covers it. Everyone wins. You promise?" My father asked, desperate to believe the lie. "You promise she won't be hurt?" "I promise," Brandon said. "Now, do you have the flash drive?" There was a pause, the sound of a zipper. "It's all there," my father whispered. "The grid layout, the generator overrides, the blind spots in the cameras. God forgive me. God might." Brandon laughed darkly. "But the DeLucas pay better. Go home, Arthur. Wait for your next payment." I ripped the headset off, the nausea hitting me so hard I doubled over. "Chloe?" Silvio's hand was on my back instantly. "He gave it to him." I gasped, the betrayal feeling like a physical knife in my gut. "He gave them the security grid for the gallery. He thinks it's a heist. He thinks they're just stealing art." Silvio's face was a mask of fury. "He sold my home. He sold my wife. He's an idiot," I sobbed, the anger finally overtaking the grief. "He's a weak, pathetic idiot." Silvio looked at Rocco. "Pick up Arthur Foster, now." "Wait!" I grabbed Silvio's arm. "No." "Chloe, he just signed a death warrant for my men. For you. If you take him now, Brandon knows the deal is blown," I argued, wiping my face furiously. "Brandon has the drive. He's going to take it to the DeLucas. If my father disappears tonight, Brandon will know we were listening." Silvio stopped, his jaw working. "So we let him walk?" "We let him walk tonight," I said, my voice turning cold, hardening into something brittle and sharp. "We let Brandon think he won. We let him deliver that drive to his masters." "And the information on it?" Silvio asked. "Is accurate," I said, "which means we know exactly how they plan to attack. They're going to hit the gallery during the auction. They're going to cut the power and use the blind spots." I looked up at Silvio, my eyes dry now. "We aren't going to fix the blind spots," I said. "We're going to move them. We're going to turn the gallery into a kill box." Silvio looked at me with a mixture of terror and admiration. "And your father?" "He's not my father anymore," I whispered, touching the envelope hidden in my purse. "He made his choice. Now he lives with it." The car sped into the night, carrying us away from the party, away from the pretense of civilization, and back into the darkness where we belonged. The warehouse was cold, a vast industrial space on the outskirts of the harbor that smelled of rust and salt water. It was the nerve center of Silvio's operation, a stark contrast to the polished elegance of the Rossi Gala we had just left. Banks of monitors lined one wall, flickering with data streams, satellite feeds, and the jagged waveform of the audio coming from the tracker on Brandon's lapel. I sat on a metal folding chair, still wearing my silver metallic gown, the hem pooling on the dirty concrete floor like a puddle of mercury. A heavy wool blanket was draped over my shoulders, but I couldn't stop shivering. It wasn't the cold. It was the aftershock of the voice I was hearing in my earpiece. Silvio stood behind me, his hand resting on the back of my chair, a silent, solid presence. He had removed his tuxedo jacket and rolled up his sleeves, ready for work. Rocco was at the main console, typing furiously with his uninjured hand, his face grim. "Audio is clear," Rocco announced. "Target is moving. Vehicle is heading north toward the DeLuca territory." I adjusted the headset, pressing it tighter against my ear. The sounds of the car engine were a steady drone, punctuated by Brandon singing along to the radio. He sounded happy. He sounded victorious. "He has no idea," Silvio murmured, leaning down. "He thinks he's bringing them the keys to the kingdom." "He is," I said, my voice hollow. Just not the keys, he thinks. The audio shifted. The car slowed, turn signals clicking. A heavy gate opening. Voices. I'm here to see Giancarlo. Brandon's voice said, dripping with self-importance. I have the package. Step out of the vehicle, a rough voice commanded. Hands where I can see them. I flinched. Silvio's hand tightened on the chair. Relax, Brandon said. I'm on the payroll. Ask your boss. The girl's father delivered. I closed my eyes, hearing him say it. The girl's father, detached, transactional, made the bile rise in my throat again. My father wasn't a person to them. I wasn't a person. We were assets and liabilities. We have confirmation, Rocco said. He's entering the DeLuca compound in the Bronx. That confirms the alliance. We have enough, Silvio said, straightening up. We take them down. I'll mobilize the hit squads. No, I said, pulling the headset off and letting it drop around my neck. Not yet. Silvio walked around the chair to face me. Chloe, we have the location. We have the proof. We can end this tonight. If you attack the compound now, it's a siege, I argued, my mind racing through the scenarios. They'll be dug in. You'll lose men. And Brandon, in the chaos, he might slip away, or they might realize the drive is a trap and destroy it before they use it. So what do you propose? Silvio asked, crossing his arms. Let them plan the attack, I said, standing up. The silver dress shimmered under the harsh halogen lights. Let them think they have the advantage. My father gave them the electrical schematics for the gallery. He showed them where the generator overrides are. He showed them the ventilation shafts. I walked over to the large table where a blueprint of the gallery was spread out. I traced the lines with a finger that trembled only slightly. They're going to cut the power here. I pointed to the sub-basement. Then they're going to enter through the loading dock, using the darkness. They think the cameras in the East Wing are blind because of the construction. That's what the drive says. And they are blind, Silvio noted. We turn them back on, I said. But we feed them a loop. We let them see an empty hallway while we stack a dozen men behind the walls. Silvio looked at the map, then at me. You want to invite them in? I want to trap them, I corrected. The charity auction is in 2 days. It's the perfect target. High value, lots of civilians to use as leverage. Just like Brandon threatened. They won't be able to resist. It's risky. Rocco grunted from the console. Civilians in the crossfire. We verify the guest list, Silvio said, his mind catching up to mine. We fill the room with our people. Wives, cousins, associates. No real civilians. And my father? I asked, looking at Silvio. Silvio's expression darkened. We have a team on him. He's at a motel on Route 9. Drinking. He's going to wait for his next payment. I said bitterly. He's not going anywhere. Chloe. Silvio stepped closer, taking my hands. You need to make a call on him. If we leave him in play, he is a loose end. If Brandon gets suspicious, he might torture him for more intel. Or he might just kill him to tie up the loop. I looked at the blueprint. I looked at the man I loved, who was willing to burn the world for me. And then I thought about the man who had raised me. The man who had sold my safety for a stack of gambling chips. Secure him, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but quietly. Make it look like he skipped town. A gambling debt run. And then? Silvio asked. Bring him to the basement of the safe house, I said. I want him on ice until after the auction. He doesn't get to talk to anyone. He doesn't get a phone. He sits in a room and thinks about what he did. And after? We'll decide after we survive, I said. Silvio nodded to Rocco. Execute the extraction. Standard bag and tag. No injuries if possible, but don't let him make a scene. On it, boss. Rocco picked up a radio. I turned away, walking toward the dark window of the warehouse that looked out over the black water of the harbor. I felt hollowed out. The adrenaline of the party had faded, leaving a cold ache in my chest. Silvio came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, pulling my back against his chest. He rested his chin on my shoulder, careful not to crush the silver silk. You did good tonight, he whispered. You were perfect. I feel sick, I admitted. He's my dad, Silvio. He taught me how to ride a bike. He used to make me pancakes on Sundays." "I know," Silvio said, tightening his hold, "and that is why this is the hardest thing you will ever do. But he is not that man anymore. Addiction took that man away a long time ago. The man who sold us out is a stranger." I leaned my head back against him. "Is the baby okay?" "The stress. The baby is a Zanarello," Silvio said with fierce conviction. "He is tough, like his mother." He turned me around in his arms. "We are going home, to the real house. We have 24 hours to turn the gallery into a fortress. You need to sleep." "I can't sleep," I said. "You will," he promised. "I will watch over you. No one gets in, no one gets out." We left the warehouse, the cold night air biting at my exposed skin. As I climbed into the SUV, I looked back at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Brandon was celebrating. Somewhere out there, my father was drinking himself into a stupor, thinking he had won a reprieve. They didn't know that the girl in the silver dress wasn't a victim anymore. They didn't know that I had traded my innocence for a Glock and a plan. "Enzo," Silvio said as the car started, "take us home and tell the crew to prep the gallery. We're going to war." I rested my hand on my stomach, hidden beneath the metallic fabric. "Hold on, little one," I thought. "Just a little longer. Mommy is going to clean up the mess." The car merged onto the highway, the lights blurring into streaks of red and white. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't look at the tracker app. I just watched Silvio's reflection in the window. A dark guardian in a world of glass and steel. The trap was set. Now, we just had to wait for the wolves to come to dinner. The amethyst dress was a statement of war disguised as couture. The deep, rich purple silk wrapped around my body like a second skin, the color of royalty and bruises, trailing behind me in a dramatic train that hissed softly against the polished marble floors of the Zanarello gallery. It was the night of the charity auction, the night we had advertised to the world, and specifically to Brandon, as the moment the gallery would be most vulnerable. I stood on the mezzanine overlooking the main hall, my hand resting on the velvet rope. Below me, the space was filling with people. To an untrained eye, it was the usual mix of high society donors, art collectors, and philanthropists. But I knew better. Every waiter carrying a tray of champagne was a soldier. The coat-check girl was an expert marksman. The older couple admiring the abstract sculpture near the entrance were retired intelligence operatives Silvio kept on retainer. We had emptied the guest list of anyone innocent. Tonight, the gallery was a stage, and the audience was entirely composed of wolves waiting for a pack of hyenas to breach the doors. "You are gripping the rail too hard," a low voice murmured beside me. Silvio appeared at my elbow, looking devastating in a black tuxedo that concealed the shoulder holster I knew he was wearing. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at me, his dark eyes scanning my face for cracks in the porcelain mask I had constructed. "I'm fine," I lied, loosening my grip. "Just waiting for the curtain to rise. The perimeter is secure," Silvio said, his voice a low rumble meant only for me. "The feed from the loading dock shows movement. They took the bait. They are cutting the external power feeds now. And the backup generator is rigged to fail after 10 seconds, Silvio confirmed. "Just long enough to give them hope, then plunge them into the dark. That's when we switched to thermal." I looked down at the crowd. My father wasn't there yet. We had brought him out of the safe house for this, staged him in the manager's office downstairs with a bottle of scotch and a fake promise that he was there to supervise the transfer of funds. He was the final piece of the lure. Brandon needed to believe his inside man was in position. "It's almost time," I whispered, checking the diamond watch on my wrist. 8:58 p.m. "Go to the podium," Silvio instructed. "Stay behind the ballistic glass. Do not move until I give the clear." "I know the drill, Silvio. Chloe?" He caught my hand, pulling me back for a split second. His thumb brushed over the pulse point of my wrist. "I love you. Remember that when the lights go out." "I love you too," I said, my throat tight. "Now go hunt." He melted into the shadows of the upper corridor, moving to his tactical position. I took a deep breath, smoothed the silk of my purple dress, and descended the grand staircase. As I reached the podium at the front of the room, The murmur of the crowd died down. I looked out at the sea of faces. Our people, all of them, and forced a smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice amplified by the microphone. "Thank you for joining us tonight. The Zanarello Gallery is proud to present." Click. The heavy thud of high-voltage breakers tripping echoed through the building. The crystal chandeliers flickered and died. The room plunged into absolute darkness. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, the emergency lights kicked on. Dim, amber strips along the floor, just enough to prevent panic, but leaving the vast open spaces in shadow. "Please remain calm," I said, my voice steady. "We seem to be experiencing a technical difficulty." It was the cue. In my earpiece, Rocco's voice crackled. "Breach at the loading dock. 12 hostiles. They're moving toward the east wing hallway." The trap was sprung. I stood frozen behind the bulletproof lectern, gripping the sides. I couldn't see the east wing from here, but I could imagine it. Brandon and the DeLuca strike team were moving through what they thought was a blind spot. They were expecting empty corridors and disabled cameras. Instead, they were walking into a kill box. I heard the first muffled shots, suppressed fire, like heavy coughs in the distance. The guests in the main hall didn't scream. They moved with synchronized precision, drawing weapons from purses and jackets, forming a defensive perimeter around the exits. "East wing clear," Rocco reported, his voice grim. 6 hostiles down. The rest are falling back toward the main hall. They're realizing it's a setup. "Flush them out," Silvio's voice cut in. "Drive them into the light." The double doors at the back of the gallery burst open. It wasn't the tactical team I expected. It was Brandon. He stumbled into the room, his expensive suit disheveled, his eyes wild with panic. He was dragging someone with him. A man who looked small and broken in his grip. My father. Brandon had a gun pressed to my father's temple. He looked around the room, expecting to see terrified civilians he could cow into submission. Instead, he saw 50 guns pointed directly at his chest. The silence that fell over the room was heavier than the darkness. "Back off!" Brandon screamed, his voice cracking. He dragged my father toward the center of the room, using him as a shield. "I'll kill him. I swear to God, I'll paint the walls with him." Arthur Foster was weeping, his legs dragging on the floor. He looked up, his eyes searching the room until they found me standing on the stage, bathed in the faint glow of the emergency exit sign. "Chloe," he sobbed. "Chloe, help me. He's crazy." I didn't move. I stood like a statue in my amethyst gown, watching the man who had given me life being held by the man who had tried to destroy it. Silvio stepped out from the shadows near the staircase. He held a pistol at his side, relaxed, terrifyingly calm. "It's over, Brandon," Silvio said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Look around you. There is no escape. The DeLucas aren't coming to save you. They're already dead in the hallway." Brandon whipped his head around, seeing the bodies of his backup being dragged away by Silvio's men in the background. The realization hit him. He had been played. The blueprints, the blind spots, the heist. It was all a lie. Brandon stared at me, hatred contorting his face. "You set me up. You bitch. You set me up. I protected my family," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone, booming through the hall. "Something you know nothing about." "I have your father!" Brandon shrieked, jamming the gun harder into Arthur's skull. Arthur whimpered, a pathetic sound. "You care about this old drunk, don't you? You paid his debts. You covered for him. Let me walk out of here or he dies." I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had taken Brandon's money, who had handed over the schematics of my home, who had sold my safety for a few more weeks at the blackjack table. I felt a strange, cold clarity settle over me. The grief I had felt in the car was gone. The anger was gone. There was only a hollow space where a daughter's love used to be. I stepped out from behind the ballistic glass. "Chloe, stay back," Silvio ordered sharply, raising his weapon. I ignored him. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at Brandon and my father. "You think that's leverage?" I asked Brandon, my voice steady. "You think holding him gives you power over me?" "I know it does," Brandon yelled, sweating profusely. You're weak, Chloe. You always were. You can't let him die. I looked Arthur Foster in the eye. I saw the fear there. Yes. But I also saw the recognition. He knew what he had done. He knew in that moment that he had spent the last of his credit. He sold me, I said to Brandon, my voice ringing clear. He sold the maps to this building. He sold the lives of my husband and my unborn child. He traded me for a stack of chips. Brandon blinked, confused by my tone. He's your father. He was my father, I corrected. Now, he's just a stranger who owes a debt he can't pay. I took another step forward, the purple silk rippling around my legs. You want to shoot him, Brandon? I asked softly. Go ahead. You can't kill a man who is already dead inside. The room gasped, a collective intake of breath from the hardened soldiers and killers assembled there. Even Silvio looked at me with wide, shocked eyes. Arthur let out a wail of despair. Chloe, no! I'm sorry. I didn't know. You knew, I said coldly. You just didn't care. Brandon hesitated. He had expected tears. He had expected begging. He had expected me to trade Silvio's life for Arthur's. He didn't know how to handle a woman who had cut the cord. In that split second of hesitation, Brandon's gun drifted a fraction of an inch away from Arthur's head as he stared at me in horror. That was all Silvio needed. Crack. The sound of the shot was deafening in the enclosed space. Brandon's head snapped back. A dark hole appeared in the center of his forehead. The look of surprise was frozen on his face as his knees buckled. He collapsed backward, the gun clattering uselessly to the marble floor. Arthur screamed, scrambling away from the body on his hands and knees, covered in the spray of Brandon's blood. He curled into a ball, sobbing hysterically. Silvio lowered his weapon. He didn't look at the body. He walked straight to the stage, vaulted onto it, and pulled me into his arms. Are you okay? He demanded, his hands gripping my shoulders. Chloe, look at me. I looked up at him. I felt numb. I'm okay. That was... He shook his head, searching for the word. I have never seen anything like that. I had to make him doubt, I whispered. I had to make him freeze. You did, Silvio said. You saved us. He turned to the floor. Rocco and 2 other guards were standing over my father. Arthur was still weeping, rocking back and forth. Get him up, Silvio ordered. Rocco hauled Arthur to his feet. My father looked up at the stage, his eyes pleading. Chloe? Thank you. Oh God, thank you. I knew you wouldn't let him hurt me. I knew... Take him away, I interrupted, turning my back on him. Arthur froze. What? Chloe? Where are they taking me? I'm your dad. I stopped. I didn't turn around. I spoke to the empty air in front of me. You're a liability, Arthur. And I'm a Zanarello now. We clean up our messes. Chloe! He screamed as Rocco dragged him toward the exit. Chloe, please, I'm sorry, Chloe! The doors swung shut, cutting off his voice. The silence returned to the gallery. I felt a hand on my waist. Silvio turned me around. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me against his chest, burying his face in my hair. I stood there in my amethyst dress, surrounded by armed men and a dead body. And finally, I let myself shake. It's done, Silvio whispered into my ear. The DeLucas are broken. Brandon is gone. It's done. I rested my head on his shoulder, closing my eyes. Is it? Or is this just who we are now? This is who we have to be to survive, he said. But we are together. And that is the only thing that matters. He lifted me into his arms, carrying me off the stage, stepping over the wreckage of the night. I buried my face in his neck, inhaling the scent of him, and let the darkness take the rest of the memories away. 7 months later, the rain was hammering against the glass, a relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the beating of my own heart. 7 months had crawled by since the night we turned the gallery into a battleground, but the storm outside felt eerily familiar. It was a dark, stormy night, almost identical to the one where I had stood on the sidewalk outside the gallery, pregnant and terrified, waiting for a savior. But tonight, the room was warm. The air smelled of lavender and sterilized cotton. And I wasn't waiting for anyone. He was already here. I lay back against the pillows of the hospital bed, exhausted in a way that felt bone-deep but strangely euphoric. My body felt light, emptied out, sore but victorious. Silvio was standing by the window, looking out at the storm. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo or a tactical vest. He was wearing a soft gray sweater and jeans, looking younger, softer than the world ever allowed him to be. In his arms, he held a bundle wrapped in a white blanket. He was swaying gently, rocking back and forth, murmuring something in Italian that was too low for me to catch. "Is he asleep?" I asked, my voice raspy. Silvio turned. The look on his face broke me. The ruthless Don, the man who had put a bullet in Brandon's head without blinking, was looking at the tiny creature in his arms with an expression of absolute terrified wonder. "He is staring at me," Silvio whispered, walking back toward the bed. "He has your eyes, Chloe. Hazel. But he has my frown. Poor kid." I smiled weakly. "Give him here." Silvio leaned down and placed the baby in my arms. Matteo. Our son. He was tiny, perfect, with a shock of dark hair and a scowl that indeed rivaled his father's. He shifted in his sleep, his little hand curling into a fist against my chest. "He's perfect," I breathed, touching his cheek. "He is a miracle," Silvio corrected, sitting on the edge of the bed. He reached out and stroked Matteo's head with one finger. I never thought I would have this. A son. A future that wasn't just blood and gunpowder. "We fought for him," I said. "He earned his place here." Silvio nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He placed it on the bedside table. "What's that?" I asked. "The deed," Silvio said quietly. "For the farmhouse in Montana." I looked at the envelope. I knew what it meant. My father, not the myth I had clung to as a kid, but the broken, dangerous man he had proved himself to be. Arthur had been in a holding cell for the last 7 months. Sober. Terrified. We hadn't spoken. I hadn't visited. He is on a plane now," Silvio said. "Escorted by 2 of my men. The house is isolated. It has a garden, a library, but no internet, no phone lines. And the nearest town is 50 miles away. Prison," I said. "Sanctuary," Silvio corrected. "He is safe there. The DeLucas are gone, but there are always other wolves. He can't gamble in Montana. He can't sell secrets. He can live out his days in peace." "Does he hate me?" I asked, looking down at Matteo. "He cried when we told him," Silvio said. "He asked if the baby was a boy or a girl. I told him it was a boy. He said to tell you he hopes you're a better parent than he was." I felt a single tear slide down my cheek. "That's a low bar." "You have already cleared it," Silvio said, wiping the tear away with his thumb. "You protected your son. You faced down a gunman for him. You are the best mother he could ask for." He leaned in and kissed me. A soft, lingering kiss that tasted of relief and promise. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. "The business is settled," he said. "The territories are secure. Rocco and Enzo are already folding the crews into something that actually looks like order. For the first time in 10 years, we are at peace. Peace." I tested the word. It sounded strange. "What do we do with peace?" "We live," Silvio said. "We raise Matteo. We buy more art. We argue about paint colors for the nursery." I laughed, a tired, happy sound. I was thinking gold, to match the robe. "Gold is good," he agreed. He looked at me, his eyes dancing with a flicker of the old dangerous spark. "You know," he murmured, glancing at the ring on my finger. The real one this time. A massive emerald-cut diamond that he had placed there the day after the shooting. I realized something. "What?" "That night on the street, when Brandon asked you..." I smiled, remembering the fear, the rain, and the way Silvio had emerged from the car like a dark god. "If I was still single?" I finished. "Yes." He kissed my temple, then kissed Matteo's head. "I never let you answer him properly." I looked at my husband. I looked at our son. I looked at the rain falling harmlessly against the window, unable to touch us in our warm, secure tower. "I think the answer was pretty clear," I whispered, leaning into his touch. "I was never single, Silvio. Even before we met, I was just waiting for you to come and claim me. And I did, he said, wrapping his arms around both of us. And I always will. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, in the quiet circle of our family, the silence was finally, perfectly enough. The end.